To all of the South African Afrikaans refugees that are coming to America soon, I just want to let you know, as someone whose wife is Afrikaans, who's been to South Africa multiple times, you're gonna have a bad time. There's no white genocide happening in South Africa. You have crime that's happening as a result of racism-fueled generational economic inequality, the same thing that's happening in America. We're just a couple decades ahead of you on the unchecked capitalism timeline. But I have good news for you. You don't have to worry about the cheap exploited labor rising up against you anymore, because now that you're in America, you'll get to be the cheap exploited labor. If you were middle class or upper middle class in South Africa and you come to America, you're poor now. Like, really poor. You're not gonna have maids and gardeners and personal servants that you can pay $15 a day for. Now you get to be the cheap labor. But by all means, please come to America and experience the American capitalism that Elon Musk's been raving about to you. You'll probably love it. You know, what do I know? There's probably very little chance that you'll end up going back to South Africa in a year or two after realizing how overpriced and fucked up America is. I wouldn't even worry about that as a possibility. And if you think I'm being mean to these people because I think they're a bunch of racist, bigoted colonizers who wish they could go back to apartheid South Africa, it's just because I do think that. But to them, I say, welcome to the American dream. Please let me know when you've woken up.
Well, aren't these just the healthiest looking refugees I've ever seen? The most nourished, the most well kept, cleanest, most well-dressed refugees I've ever seen. I've never seen such stunningly healthy, good-looking refugees in my life. Thank God America offered them refuge from South Africa. Thank God. They look like they could not have even stood another day there. Thank God.
I'm not sure anything's made me as angry lately as seeing the Trump administration allow the South African refugees today to arrive in America. These are 50 people, all of them white, don't need to be here. But more than that, no refugees are allowed, and we're rounding up brown people all over the place. We're letting in these 50 white people from South Africa. It is insane. It is Trump's racism and this administration's racism on display in a blatant, we don't give a fuck what you think way. It is so disturbing and so disgusting. And I've been kind of dumbfounded that the Democrats aren't making even more of a stink of it than they should be. We're all talking about the plane, which is the new Air Force One, which is gross. But this is even more gross. This is racism right in front of you. Is anyone going to get mad? Is anyone going to speak up besides people on cable news? Are there any Democrats who are horrified by this? Anyone? Like, what the fuck are we waiting for? What are we doing here? God, it honestly drives me crazy. And that's it.
The first batch of white South African extremists being imported into the United States has just arrived. And don't be fooled by the young-looking children, because children are as much manipulated by their parents as anyone else. It's a cult. White extremism in South Africa is a cult that is inherited, so don't be fooled. But I want you to take note of how they're packing. No refugee ever would pack this much because you're running from persecution. You don't have time to pack. So the fact they're packing so comfortably tells us that the only thing they're running from, they're not running at all. Just look. They had so much time from being persecuted that they were able to comfortably just pack up suitcase after suitcase after suitcase after suitcase because they had time to be comfortable in moving to a different country. The difference between a refugee and an immigrant is that a refugee has no choice but to go. An immigrant is wanting to move, but it's not that they have to move. You see, these people wanted to move. It's not that they have to move, but because they could not qualify for a visa because you require education, talent, and money, which they don't have, they couldn't get a visa. Because they don't actually want to do the work, they couldn't even gain legal immigrant status or even take the hard work of being an undocumented immigrant. They want us to pay for them to be an advancement here in the United States because they think this is their safe haven of white supremacy. You see, look at this picture. Do you think they are running from something? No, they're not. And I need you to understand that. Later today, we're going to take on a much more examination of the difference between who would actually qualify for refugee and why South African whites would not qualify for refugee status. Again, no Palestinian fleeing from Gaza would have these much luggages. No one fleeing from Venezuela would have these much luggages. No one fleeing from even Mexico would have these much luggages. No illegal immigrant would bring this much luggages. They are comfortably capable of getting on a flight with their entire livelihoods and coming to a different country. That is not refugee and asylum seeking. That is immigration, and we are paying them with refugee status in order for them be rewarded for their tears of losing apartheid. Be angry. Today is when they touched down in the United States of America, and they had all this time to pack up. They're not refugees. This is favoritism.
They only want white people here. Because when we think about refugees who need immediate resettlement, expedited screenings, we usually think about people who are fleeing extreme violence, persecution, famine, war in places like South Sudan, Myanmar, the Congo, not white Afrikaners. See that chartered plane the Trump administration is sending? It's not going to collect refugees that have been sitting in resettlement camps for years, fully vetted, waiting to come to the United States to escape violence. No, it's going to South Africa to collect white people who claim they're being discriminated against. Why would they be getting discriminated against? Probably because they spent generations instituting legalized forms of racial segregation and discrimination called apartheid, aka Stephen Miller's wet dream. See, while the rest of the world after World War II saw that maybe racial discrimination not such a hot idea and favored more policies of integration and away from colonization, Afrikaners doubled down on that shit and instituted apartheid. Although it ended over 30 years ago, the social and economic legacies of apartheid continue today. South Africa is the most unequal country in the entire world, according to the World Bank, with white South Africans earning over 12 times what black South Africans do. But don't worry, we're going to make sure that the white Afrikaners who instituted generations of discrimination and segregation against black people get everything they need to get started here in the United States.